You have 50 notebooks, you have 3 different Spark jobs, you have semantic model refresh. Everything needs to run overnight in a predefined order without failing silently. You could do that with pipelines, but well, you drag and drop and you connect and it works. But what happens when you need branching logic? What happens when you need exponential backoff, dynamic task generation based on a config file? Suddenly, the visual designer becomes a limitation. That's exactly why Microsoft brought Apache Airflow into Fabric. Not to replace pipelines, but to give you the code-first alternative when visual orchestration hits its ceiling. Today I will show you what Apache Airflow is, how it works, what are the do's and don'ts, and we will also cover the community questions. Enjoy! When you look at the Fabric periodic table, there's a specialized item for Apache Airflow job, and you have the description, you have all the key features, the use cases, and also some scenarios covered, when to use it with the tasks and extract and transform and validate and so on, and of course technical links. So first let's dive a little bit into the architecture of an Apache Airflow job. Since we are talking about Python scripts, we need a storage where we can store these scripts. This is a Fabric managed storage. Fabric managed storage, which holds the requirements.txt. The plugins folder, and the DAG folder. All this we can sync with Git sync. This is of course possible. The Git sync comes from the secrets backend. We will have a look in a second. We have two different pool options. The first one to run this stuff. The first one is a starter pool. It's pretty similar to the notebooks. There we have a node 1, which is a scheduler. We have a node 2, which is web server. And we have a node 3, which is a worker. So 3 different nodes that we can use. And we can have a custom pool. And the custom pool has a similar structure. But of course, we can have more workers if needed. And we can size accordingly. All that is a little bit feeded by, so all of that is part of a Fabric workspace, but we have an external component here. And you might feel that in the demonstration, then there is some kind of external dependency. So first of all, GitHub or DevOps, Azure DevOps. Yes, Azure Key Vault for all the credentials, which I think is very useful, and Entra ID for authentication. And of course, for the Git sync, there is a dependency to the GitHub or DevOps. And for everything else, we have a dependency, for example, from Entra ID to the web server. To the secrets backend from the Key Vault scheduler. There we go. Also to the DAG folder. So this is like an interplay. So all this is part of a workspace, but we have different components. So all this is a Fabric workspace, but we have different components involved, which is storage, external dependencies, and either the starter pool or the custom pool that we need to define upfront. So why this architecture? Because Apache Airflow needs 3 services running simultaneously: the scheduler, who decides which tasks to run; the web server is the monitoring UI; and the worker, they execute the task. So Fabric provisions for that 3 dedicated nodes, together with high availability. For custom pools, you can have auto scale, which means for each extra node, you have 3 plus more workers scaling on demand. But the 3 node minimum tier has higher costs for a single deployment, but you have then high availability, which the Azure Data Factory Workflow Orchestration Manager never had. At the Airflow stuff. So, well, it took some issues to configure that environment. You see all the open tabs and so on. I will guide you a little bit through it. Basically, the start is fairly simple. You hit on new and say, okay, new Airflow job. This essentially creates like an Airflow cluster where you can run different jobs. So let's do that. I will delete it because I have already pre-created that thing. So then you start with the DAG requirement, very simple. And well, so we can there create a new DAG. There's like a default hello world DAG that we can run. It produces, not surprisingly, hello world. And we should see then under recent runs here. So I will show you the output. We can clean up, I think, everything here, because I can guide you through that. There you go. So the run is still queued. Shouldn't really take long. We're using a starter pool here. So let's, it even failed to start. So because it's default code, it shouldn't fail. So let's create a new one here. That's DAG1. It simply writes with a bash command hello world. And let's run it in my pre-created cluster. That should work. We will see it in a second. And in the meantime, let's delete the other one because, it runs in the background, which is not needed. So there we go. Deletion was successfully, and let's go to our Airflow job here. Well, that's the old one. That's quite a mess. There we go. So let's check whether there's already some output produced. Not yet, no recent runs. But you always can go to monitor Airflow. And I need to re-authenticate here. And then you are in the admin panel, where you can see, okay, this is our DAG1 here, which is paused at the moment. So one successful run, there we go. We should also see the successful run here in the UI. So let's reload that. So you see, it's a bit special. We can rerun it. Yeah, there we go. That's what. So it's queued now. It succeeded. It's very simple. And then you have an open logs file here, where you will be redirected to the Airflow UI. And you see, this is basically the result of our demo flow. So very simple. In general, you have this UI here, where you can manage the jobs in the Airflow. You can also browse all the jobs in the audit logs, and can browse also all the admin stuff. And there I want to point out that you can set variables here. And you have also the provider section. So I've set in the variables area the Fabric client secret, which I will point you out in a second. And in the provider section, you have all the providers that are available here. And you have all the connections. And so you see it's like a parallel world. That's the point here. But before we dive into that, just to mention, you have a starter pool by default. It's like the default pool for the notebooks. It stops with a timeout when you want a 24/7 cluster without warm up. You can switch, but then you have to pay. That's the point. Well, so that's like the you can view the connections, but as you see, you are always thrown to this Airflow UI, which is a little bit special behavior in general, right? Yeah. When we have a look at the run architecture, it's quite demanding. So let's start. We start off with our developer. And I need, I think, to draw pretty long lines now. The developer pushes the DAG, the Python file, to GitHub. That's the first step. Let's abbreviate that with GitHub. From there, the GitHub sync pushes this to the Airflow job. And from there, the DAG is registered at the scheduler, which is one of the nodes. From there, the cron trigger fires, cron. And the cron trigger then executes the task 1. Execute. The execution is done by the worker, another role. The execution most probably will trigger something in Fabric. So the next point, let's switch to green, is the Fabric REST API. So it's then executing stuff via a post call. Let's, for example, say it executes a notebook against the Fabric REST API. Let's say it runs a notebook. Then the notebook is executed. So we are now at the notebook. There. This runs a notebook. Run notebook. And the status, hopefully success, is then propagated back to the Airflow job. Let's say it also needs to trigger a pipeline. And let's say it has to refresh a semantic model. So the next lines are pipeline and semantic model. So obviously, the next job is triggered from the Airflow worker to the Fabric REST API, and the REST API then goes to the pipeline, reports the status back, and exactly the same, I will condense it here a little bit, is then done against the semantic model. And there is also a back communication. When all this is done, there is a generic job completed. Job completed communication. And from there on, the status is propagated back through the Airflow in the end through the web interface back to the developer. So it's an orchestration engine, as you might already know it from other orchestration engines. Fabric means option, so there's always a question when to use what. So in this case, when to use Airflow versus pipeline. So, well, first of all, you need some orchestration. So this is the entry point. You need orchestration. There's a need for orchestration. Next question is, do you have Python skills? Or in today's world, you might need only large language model skills, but still. So let's say you have yes, Python skills. Then the next question is, do you need something cross-cloud? Or do you need something like dbt? Let's say cross-cloud. If you need something cross-cloud, then you are at the Airflow. When you say, okay, I don't need something cross-cloud. No. Yes. Do you have a complex job? If yes, you are again at Airflow. If you say no, it's not complicated. So no. Then you could. Then the question is this fabric to fabric simple ETL? If yes, you are at the data pipeline. If it's not simple ETL fabric to fabric, then the advisory is both. Combine Airflow and data pipeline. And we didn't resolve the first one. When you don't have Python skills, then you are at the data pipeline layer. So you see, when you need cross-cloud, you are in the Airflow world. When you have complex requirements, you are in the Airflow world. And when you need to orchestrate stuff across different areas, not only just fabric, which means essentially not only just one lake, then you should consider both. So let's have a look at the admin UI, or well, basically I've written in a second DAG, which connects to Fabric and starts a notebook, and what seems like a simple task, it's a little bit complicated because you have to go through an app registration. So that's fine. You have to go to Entra ID and create an app registration. Give it the appropriate permissions for Fabric. And then you need quite a lot of code, thanks to large language models who produce that. But still, it's well, for simply starting a notebook, it's quite a job. And you need to create a connection to Fabric, which is a little bit special. So I've created a Fabric default connection with the type Microsoft Fabric. You have the plus sign here. And you can do it like that, right? Microsoft Fabric. There we go. And you have this way to create a connection. So I did that in this way with the tenant and the client ID. It turns out it doesn't work because, at least in my case, because of the client secret. There was one hint that you should go to generic, which didn't work either. So I did it with code. And for code, of course, I didn't want to store the client secret in the code. So I created a variable. You see it like here. It's start out. That's a Fabric client secret. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting the parameters by hand. Also, this editor is sometimes a bit glitchy. But still we can connect, and of course you need to provide to give permissions to your app registration to the workspace. So it's quite a lot of work. Yes, you don't need to install an Airflow server, but in my opinion there's still some way to go. When we now run this DAG, it should simply start our notebook, and as you might imagine, the notebook is no rocket science. So we can open the notebook. Beside it simply prints hello world. So and you see now this happens quite often, and I'm in Edge. So when I go back, the Airflow tab is grayed out, so I need to reload that, and then my context is gone, but still I can go back. Now the recent DAG runs are gone, but I can see the recent DAG runs here. But the naming Fabric Run Notebook 1 is not the DAG Python name. It's you see it here. It's the DAG ID I provide. So I can see the total success, which is this one, and I can see the task ID, the run ID, and all that stuff that I need. I see the graph. It's not very complicated. The code, the event log, and so on. Yeah. So it's okay, but when you are familiar with Apache Airflow, I think it's really great to have it now in Fabric. When you are familiar with Fabric, you need to get a little bit familiar with Apache Airflow to let it run properly. So that's the point here. And you can work with plugins, you can work with your DAGs, you can import the stuff, or you can edit it in the browser directly. So that's like the hands-on part of the Apache Airflow. You have already seen that Airflow is pretty integrated with other tool sets, so let's go a little bit more into detail regarding that integration. So we have our Apache Airflow job. The Airflow job is first of all the Python DAG, which is like the core, and this is fed by git sync, Azure DevOps on this side, or GitHub. And this again is then fed by the local dev with some tooling like VS Code, or you name it. So this is like the developer's workflow. There we get the DAGs. The next thing that we have are the Airflow connections. To any tool, you name it, like Fabric, like Snowflake, like whatever. So you need a bunch of credentials. So there is the Azure Key Vault integration with the secrets backend. So this is part of the security stack. And we have the app registration in Entra ID that also gives us OAuth tokens. That we need for connections like to Fabric or like something else. Next, let's ram that. So we are here in the Airflow job area. Like that makes that pretty clear. Then we have the requirements. .txt. This defines all the packages that we need, all the Python modules. So this is about like pip install. Type install. Depending on the tool set, whether you are on the Astronomer Cosmos or whether you are on the DBT Fabric. Anyway, from there on, we have our SQL transformations, which lead to a warehouse, Fabric warehouse. So all this is part of the DBT integration. Next, we have the scheduler. And the scheduler targets all the Fabric items. I could go to the Fabric periodic table, as you might imagine. So notebooks, Spark job definitions, data pipelines, semantic model, user data functions, you name it. Everything in Fabric then is triggered by the schedule. I will just draw one line here. And this is still part of the Airflow job. So when you see it in like an overview, we have the Airflow job connecting on one side with Git on the developer side, with the security on to like the Azure side, Airflow connections, requirements towards DBT, and the scheduler towards Fabric. But Fabric, of course, lives or is connected out of the Airflow connection. So it's pretty interconnected, or it's like loosely integrated, as you would like to say. So last but not least, let's have a short look at costs. So regarding Fabric capacity, we need for a small pool at least F8 and at least F16 for a large pool. So this is like the prerequisite. And pool means in this case a custom pool. And the custom pool is always on. So the custom pool has two different sizings. Like the small is 5 CU base consumption. So this is connected with the small pool here. And the large pool is like 10 CU. It's connected to the large pool capacity, and there you can add an extra node for with adding 1.3 CU, and you can have auto scale. So you see, it's just roughly, because always it depends on your needs, but that you have an idea with a small, and I think the main point here is you need at least F8 capacity. And it's in this case a little bit comparable to the SQL database issues. Let's have a look at the community questions. So the first one is the Apache Airflow connect config struggles. So you have the generic connector, you have the Fabric connector. The generic connector uses the refresh token, the Fabric connector uses client ID and secret. You have two different Python libraries, Apache Airflow Microsoft Fabric plugin, or Airflow providers, Microsoft Fabric operators. I got it right once, but then on a second try, I documented the steps. I'm getting errors. So problem is the documentation is a little bit outdated partially, and Microsoft is on updating the docs, and you see it in my connection. It works now, but well, if you go across older blogs and so on, be aware there were some changes in the usage of the connection from Airflow to Fabric. Next topic is Airflow cost concerns. So Airflow's pricing is quite expensive, especially for a small company. If I'm using Airflow as an orchestrator and notebooks for transformations, I'm like paying twice. And also some other experiences where, well, I tried Airflow jobs on Fabric and they were very buggy. CU was through the roof of a day, so I went to on-prem Airflow in Docker instead. And the third opinion was Python is way more efficient from a CU usage point. Calling a pipeline from Airflow is a bit of redundant. So it depends on your needs, of course, but be aware that there are cost issues attached to Airflow, so you need to prove whether it is worse on your side. Next point, which is in general a plus, the DBT integration capability. There were some issues on the Microsoft Learning tutorial, which should be solved now. And they mostly were related to some library versions, but you will find good annotations there. And the documentation update is done. But when you go through it and you get errors from the library sites, just be aware that there was something. Next one is service principal authentication. So pipelines and notebooks are running under user accounts, and Airflow could solve that by authenticating natively with a service principal. There were some concerns and some discussions in the community, and it is solved now because now you can authenticate with a service principal together with the official provider. Just when you came across that discussion, it's also solved. So you see, it's in heavy progress, all the thing, right? Next question was about CI/CD and Git integration. So how to version control DAG files and so on. So basically, we have seen that already in the concept. Airflow supports Git sync to pull DAGs from a remote repository. So you can integrate that quite nicely into CI/CD. This was like from the community, and see it's like early in these days and it's in progress, but it's really nice. I think that Airflow is integrated now. So I hope this video helped you to get started or to get an overview. If you want to get notified once I release a new video, just hit subscribe on the channel. Thanks for attending and take care.